Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tracy Show. I am Tracy. Today is Tuesday. I believe it's October I want to say 11th so badly. So you'll have to I have to apologize. You don't have to apologize. I have to apologize for getting on here a little bit late. For some reason, StreamYard completely deleted my old link. So I just emailed the new link to the person who I'm going to have in here today. And um, I don't know what happened. It just all of a sudden just disappeared. And it's like, "Oh, you deleted it." I'm like, no, I didn't delete it. Why, if I deleted it, then it shouldn't be on the page. But anyway, um, again, my name is Tracy. This is the Tracy Show. Remember to please like this broadcast, share this broadcast. Please subscribe to the channel. We are so very, very, very close to having 100 subscribers. Um, we're like at, I think I'm at 86, and I want to grow that organically and not just like pay somebody to have subscription. So like this page definitely, because if the more I'm liked, the more likely Facebook is to suggest um, my videos in terms of just making suggestions. I'm looking to see is my guest on his way. Like I said, I just literally sent this 2 minutes ago, so we'll just be hanging out here for a minute and talking about what's going to happen in the next few weeks as we head closer and closer to November 8th. Um, it's like I said, this festival is getting more and more cramped. I'm getting more candidates, which is always good. Um, it's always good to talk to third party candidates, and it's just good to do that. So I definitely, again, I said I had something to tell you. November the 8th show. I will be doing a November the 8th show, but I will be going completely solo. I will not be interviewing anyone in terms of. Hi, Jacob. How are you today? Good to see you. Glad you're here. Um, if you are a candidate that wants to be interviewed even after election season, because I'm definitely looking for candidates after the election season, um, please email me at tracymediallc@gmail.com. And that's a comma, but that's because I was typing and talking at the same time, but it should be a period. tracymediallc@gmail.com. That's my email. I will get back to you. Usually I'm pretty good. I normally get back within 24 hours. Oh, that's good. Jacob was the second person that I interviewed in terms of running for office. He is running as a write-in candidate here in the state of Indiana for office. So I know he's working hard to get his campaign, all squared away. And I know I just announced that that I will be doing a solo show the 8th. It will just be me. I'll just do kind of like what I expect to happen. But it looks like my guest is coming on here, and so I'm going to add him. Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you, Tracy?
I'm doing fantastic. So everyone, we are joined by Hugh McTavish, and I'm glad you got my second link because I was just explaining to the audience, StreamYard deleted my first one, and I don't know why. So Hugh is running for office. I'll let him talk about what office he is running for and things like that. And of course, I'll ask questions. But if anybody has a question for me to ask, please put it in the comment section. I'll be sure to get to it. Hugh, tell us what office you're running for, where you're running, and what under which party you're running under.
I'm running for governor of Minnesota with the Independence Alliance Party, which is the successor to the Independence Party that elected Jesse Ventura governor of Minnesota.
Okay, so are you on the ballot or are you as a write-in candidate?
No, I'm on the ballot. I'm on the ballot.
Okay, so I gotta ask this question. In Minnesota, how is it you have to gather petitions to be on the ballot, or you put your name and you're on the ballot?
No, we had to get 2,000 signatures on the ballot, so which is kind of difficult. Also, you have to get them in a 2-week period. So there was a more famous candidate who, with a different party, who tried to get on the ballot. He had a show, a radio. He used to be on TV on the Minneapolis St. Paul shows with a news show there, and then he had a talk show on radio station. So the press was talking about him, and he tried to get his 2,000 signatures and failed to do that. So we succeeded.
Yeah, again, all the surrounding states surrounding Indiana have way lower signature levels. You have 2,000. Again, we have
2,000. But the trick is that you got to get them in 2 weeks, so that I think most states allow more time than that.
Yeah, but it's still better than 45,000.
Sorry, what?
It's better than 45,000.
Oh, well, that's the number where in Indiana?
To run for Secretary of State, to get ballot access, you had to have, well, it's 2% of the rate that voted in the previous election. And this year it happened to be 45,000.
And what time, how long do you have to do that? What time?
I think it's more than 2 weeks, but I don't know. And maybe because Jacob, he's running for office, he's running in Indiana and he could tell me how long it takes. But I know it's longer than 2 weeks.
Yeah, I would imagine if that's the case, you don't have very many third-party candidates on the ballot. If it's 45,000 signatures.
No, ours end up going as write-in, so I thought that's what you were going to say. Now, I did talk to Philip last week about your party and in terms of the national party and the state party and what you're trying to run on. What are the core values that you are running for as a candidate?
I'm running on my proposal for what I call jury democracy, which is the idea that basically we, the citizens, can make decisions ourselves. We don't really need politicians for the most part or elected officials. So the proposal would be that we call a random selection of registered voters from across the state, 500 or more, which is a statistically valid sample of the population of the state. Randomly selected, invite them to come as a jury to the state capitol and basically put a bill or a proposal on trial. So both sides would get the chance to make their arguments for and against that bill. They'd have as much time as they need. The jurors would then break into smaller groups to deliberate and talk about it with each other, and then they would vote by secret ballot. And I would amend the state constitution so that every bill to become law has to pass a citizen jury like that. So we would be making policy based on evidence and arguments and reason and talking with each other instead of based on campaign contributions and money and influence, and the media gets to decide what's acceptable debate, what can be considered, and the majority leader and minority leader of the House and Senate get to decide what bills come to the floor. Here, every legislator would have the right to introduce a bill. The public also could introduce a bill by petition to the jury. And then I would say if it passes the jury, the legislature has to hold a recorded vote on it.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because I was reading on your site about that, and while there were some ideas I was crystal clear about, there were still some things I'm like, okay, I'm a little confused about it, and I'll tell you what those are, and you can definitely explain them to me. So you're saying that a bill would go to basically like a jury trial, both sides. What, under this system that you call, what would be the purpose of like a local state rep? would they still be in office, or would that just be totally
Yes.
eliminated?
The elected legislature would still have to pass bills to become law. So in effect, the jury would be a second house of the legislature, but we'd still have, and ideally, every state except Nebraska has two houses, elected houses now. Ideally, you'd have only one, I think, and the jury would be the second house. But you could keep both of the elected houses and have the jury as a third house of the legislature.
Okay.
But no, bills would still have to pass the legislature, and also the sorry about that. Also, the legislators would have. I would have it so every elected legislator has the right to introduce at least one bill in a 2-year period in a biennium. So, to me, that would be more fun to be a legislator in that system than it is in the current system, where the majority leader decides what comes to the floor. So you probably can't introduce your particular bills at all. If you can get them through, they're probably watered down and compromised to whatever the majority leader and speaker wants to allow, and lumped in with 100 other things in some bill that's 1,000 pages long.
Okay, so in this system that you're talking about, are you talking about having an odd number? Because if you have a tie, then what would be the alternative if by some reason you got 250 on one side and 250 on another? Or would you do like 501 or 505, or how would you break that tie if there was to be one?
I would actually require a 55% majority to pass something.
Okay.
So, because I think that's part of the problem now is that 51% imposes their will on 49%. We should have a reasonable consensus before we enact new laws or repeal old laws. So I would require 55% majority to pass anything. If it's 55, exactly 55%, that passes.
Okay, and when you go around the state and campaign on this idea, what is the general reception to it?
Most people like it. In fact, when I talk to people one-on-one, the large majority of people like it, and a lot of them just love it. Yes, and when I get a chance to explain it or debate with people about it, I think everybody pretty much comes away convinced. Yeah, it's been a very positive reaction to that idea, I think.
And I'm not going to assume this. I'll just ask: are there any naysayers, and if so, what are their concerns, and how do you address those concerns?
So the objections that come up are, one, that it would cost too much. It wouldn't cost too much. It would add 0.4% to the state budget. And that's paying for transportation to have people come in from if they live what we call outstate, some distance away from Minneapolis and St. Paul, and paying a minimum wage for a day or two to serve on the jury. I would pay jurors minimum wage, which is more than we pay civil and criminal trial jurors. So the cost, that's one objection, is the cost. Other people object that that nobody would show up, or it would be unrepresentative. Only retired people with time on their hands would show up. I don't think that's valid either. We would require businesses to give people time off to serve on the jury, just like they're required to give people time off to serve on a civil and criminal jury. And service would be voluntary. So if you don't want to serve, to me, that's fine. Just like you have a right not to vote, you would have a right not to serve. It just means more power for people who want to serve. So I think that's fine. But I think most people would serve. Most people would probably want the chance to decide an issue. I think I wouldn't tell people what the issue is that you're considering, but imagine that the issue is what healthcare system we're going to have. And you decide you don't want to show up because because it's too much trouble. I think you're going to kick yourself that you didn't show up to get to decide what healthcare system we have and whether we have what kind of insurance and healthcare system we have, or other important things. So another objection. Let's see what else. Some people object that basically that people are stupid. They don't have confidence in the ordinary people. I don't think people are stupid. I have total confidence in ordinary people. And also the objectively, scientifically, it's a large group of people. So one individual person, of course, has their quirks. They may not be that bright, and but also policy really isn't a matter of intelligence. It's a matter of values for the most part. But one individual person, of course, has their quirks. The point here is we use a large number of people, a statistically valid sample. Large aggregates of people make better factual decisions than any one person makes. They make better projections of the future than any one person makes. The stock market indexes are an aggregate, an average of all investors' opinions about the stock market, about companies. As we've all been told many times, the stock market indexes outperform most professional money managers. So it's hard to beat those aggregates. Same for, say, the betting line on the NFL or football games. That's the average aggregate of all bettors, and it's hard to beat those betting lines. And there's this book, The Wisdom of Crowds, that makes some of these points. But for instance, at county fairs, if you have a contest of guess how many jelly beans there are in this large jar of jelly, well, guess the weight of this pig at a county fair. The average, if you have a large number of people guessing the answer to that, the average of everybody's guess will be almost exactly right. And it will be
Okay, so you're breaking up just a tad bit. And I'm not sure why, but you're definitely breaking up there. Okay.
Phil tells me that in 4 minutes we'll be in the city.
Oh, okay. Got it. I just didn't hear that last part of the statement that you made.
Okay.
Well, go ahead.
Did you hear the part about the jelly beans in a jar at a
Yes,
county
I heard
fair?
the jelly beans and the way the pig, and then you said something after that, and it just went.
Oh, okay. So if at a county fair, if you ask people to guess how many jelly beans there are in a jar, in a large jar of jelly beans, for instance, the average of everybody's guess is going to be almost exactly correct, and it will be better than 99% of the individual guesses. So large aggregates of people make very good decisions about facts.
Okay, and you mentioned, and audience again, if you're out there and you're a third party candidate that wants to run for office, even after the election next month, hit me up by email, tracymediallc@gmail.com. Definitely looking forward to going into 2023, into 2024's election season. But the next couple of questions I want to ask is, what made you decide that this was the best way to operate government as opposed to what it is you have now in Minnesota?
It's not just Minnesota. I mean, we have basically the same system everywhere in the U.S. and similar systems in the rest of the Western world. But I think it's just a better way to operate government. You have, as I say, large aggregates of people just make better decisions than any one person makes. So, which is just really an established fact. So that would apply for government too. The way we elect representatives now, it's basically who raises money better. That's a dumb way to determine our decision makers. We really would be better off selecting people randomly. And also, it's very unrepresentative in various respects. Tends to be a bit male, a bit white, of course, very rich. There's literally nobody in Congress probably who is below the 50th percentile in income or wealth. So half of the population is not represented in that sense at all. And very old in age. Young people are almost entirely unrepresented in legislatures and in Congress. So it's very unrepresentative in age. It's also unrepresentative in power. By definition, if you are running for office, you're seeking power. And by definition, if you win office, you're good at acquiring power. So you have disproportionately people who like power and who are seeking power. Those are really not the people you want making decisions for us. In fact, that's a negative that they like power. Whereas with jury democracy, with selecting the decision makers at random, you have the meek, the people who do not seek power, and people who are not that interested in politics and don't like the fighting about it. That's going to be the majority of your jurors, and those people are, frankly, those are the people we want making decisions for us, not the people who like fighting and who like seeking power.
Now, I always ask this question of every candidate that I've ever had on this show since it started last month. What is it that you've personally given up to run for office?
That I personally gave up to run for office?
Yes.
A lot of money and a lot of time, because I'm funding my campaign myself. And of course, running for office, you get your views out there, and some of your friends and family don't like your views, so that puts a strain on some relationships. So I would say that's a lot of money and a lot of time I gave up to run for office.
And what about your time with? Because I'm always interested in hearing about this time with family and friends. Has your stance put, and you kind of alluded to it, but I'll still ask anyway, has your ideology kind of put a barrier between the two, or is it opening it up for more discussion?
Well, I've lost some friends, I would say, over my views, but to some extent that happened before I ran for office. But it's just taken a lot of time, so I don't have time. So I have less time for a social life while I'm running. I'm looking forward to the election being over and getting that time back. So yes, it hurts in that sense of lost time. I'm extremely busy with the run for office and my regular job.
Right, and that was going to be the other thing I wanted to know. How many counties are in the state of Minnesota?
Oh, I don't know. Do you know, Phil, exactly? 87.
Okay, how many of those
I phoned a friend and he knew the answer.
How many counties have you visited? So since you launched your campaign?
Oh, I haven't been, not a particularly high number. I've probably visited, you think I've been in 25, 30? Okay, 25 maybe.
Okay, so that means you're not hitting other counties, and that's because you're basically operating this, you're self-funded and all those things.
Well, I'm running statewide, so it's not like I can knock on every door. If I were running state representative, I could knock on every door, but that's not feasible for governor. So I rely on TV ads and media ads, basically yard signs and
okay.
mailers.
Now, do you have a group of volunteers, or is it just you running the whole campaign?
Got some volunteers. It's largely me.
Okay. So I'm not going to assume this. I'm just going to ask it. Do you have a campaign manager?
Yes, he's in the car with me.
Oh, okay. I feel okay. So, when you're approaching people, and I've gotten several different types of answers on this next question that I'm going to ask, but I'll ask it anyway. Assuming that your campaign accepts contributions,
Yep.
how do you encourage, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'll still ask it. As a third party candidate, do you accept money from like political action committees, dark money, those type of things, or are you more based on the small donor?
I think it's illegal for political action committees to donate directly to a campaign. So anyway, regrettably nobody's offered me that much money, so I have not had to answer that question. Um, so it's all small donors and myself
Okay.
as one
I
large.
yeah. Now I've
Sorry,
never
what?
asked this question before. Talk about, so you're running as an independent. My no, I hate to say my assumption. So I'm thinking there's going to be a Democrat running, and probably a Libertarian running for the same office.
There's a Democrat and a Republican, and then there's actually two parties that's core two marijuana parties. Their core issue is legalizing marijuana. That are both major parties in Minnesota. So we got that weird situation. So there's two different marijuana party candidates on the ballot, and me as an independent or Independence Alliance party candidate, and there's a socialist on the ballot, and then the Democrat and Republican.
Okay, have you all
There's
had
no
a
there's no libertarian. The libertarians tried to get the 2,000 signatures, and they did not succeed. The Green Party also tried to get the 2,000 signatures, and they did not succeed.
okay, and have you all had a debate yet?
No, I'm trying to get into the debates. The Republican is willing to debate me, but I can't find, so far, I've not been able to find any news organization willing to host it.
Okay, now I'm just gonna throw out ideas. Have you ever thought about hosting it yourself?
Yeah, I have thought about hosting it myself. So we may I'll try to contact the Republican candidate again and see if he initially said he wanted to have a third party hosted, but if we can't find a third party, maybe he'd be willing to have us host it ourselves.
And the reason I asked that question about the debates, one, because I think they're essential. Not the way we have them now, where it's just, okay, it's just basically you hurl an insult at me, I hurl an insult at you. We never discuss anything substantive. We just kind of
Right,
go back and forth about nothing. I think debates
right.
can be very important in terms of, you know,
That
just
that
talking to the public.
Absolutely, and that's actually what you just said. Just who gets in the best one-liner, insulting each other. That's not very, that's not a good way of informing the public. And that's one of the benefits of jury democracy. It's not about one-liners. It's not about you got 30 seconds to make your point, or 5 minutes maybe to make your point at best. You got 2-3 hours to make your point, to introduce a ton of evidence. And if you're insulting the other side, it's just going to lose you votes. There's no point to insulting the other side. And it's not really, people may appreciate a clever one-liner, but it's really not about the clever one-liners any more than a regular trial is. It's about the evidence.
And when you're trying to get your name out there in terms of yard signs and limited door knocking that you're doing, people are talking about the same kind of core issues no matter what state they live in. So I like to give candidates an issue, and then just tell me where you as a candidate stand on that particular issue.
Okay.
Okay, and so there's a couple I won't talk about because, like I told my guest last week, if I hear the wrong answer, the interview's over. But I'm pretty sure you and I kind of line up, but that's okay if we don't. So the first issue that is of concern is the economy. and people just in general don't have enough to make it. They're having trouble making ends meet because the prices of everything has gone up. Gasoline, food, rent, mortgage, everything seems to be going up. The interest rate has increased, making it harder for people to purchase homes. What type of, keeping in mind the system that you're trying to advocate for, what are some of the things you personally believe that could address that? Or are you just wanting the jury to kind of come in with their own solutions to those problems?
Yeah, the beauty of jury democracy is I don't have to have all the answers. So other people will introduce ideas. I'll introduce ideas, and we'll see what the jury likes. But I don't think. I think capitalism works pretty well, and that you don't need to. Not much I do or government does is going to have a big beneficial effect, as far as the total economic output. Now, I favor progressive taxation. Um, I would favor a universal basic income to replace all of this means testing and stuff. Just give everybody a check, basically, and that replace a lot of our welfare system. Um, uh, yeah, and I think that another important point on the inflation and the shortages. I don't think it's. I'm not sure it's exactly inflation. It's turning into inflation now, but it was really shortages. Um, most of us are not making more money in our jobs. If we had real inflation, our wages would be going up. It's just the prices of groceries and gas that have gone up. Uh, and that's a result of shortages. And the shortages started with the lockdowns. So I think it's important to note that Tim Walz, our governor, decided to create shortages in the hopes that was going to reduce COVID deaths, and it didn't reduce COVID deaths. So ordinarily you can't blame a governor for inflation, but in this case it actually is appropriate. It actually is the fault of our governor. He deliberately decided to create shortages by the lockdowns. It was very predictable we would have shortages as a result of the lockdowns, and they happened immediately when we implemented the lockdowns. So he deliberately decided to create shortages in the hopes that was going to reduce COVID deaths, and it didn't have any effect on COVID deaths. The lockdowns did not.
Okay, so next issue, um, primary education.
Um, Again, I'll bring up the lockdowns. The governor in this state, the governor in many states, decided to kick kids out of school, decided to destroy education for 2 years. Our test scores are abysmal. Effectively, kids lost their test score. They're a year behind, basically, after schools being closed for 2 years. So the lockdown policy was a decision to destroy education, to deliberately harm children in the hope that it was going to benefit their grandparents and great grandparents. It would have been immoral even if it had worked, and it did not work. This was just inexcusable, inexcusable, I think. So I don't have any magic bullets to restore education. We should open the schools and educate kids in person, like it's some giant discovery that in-person education works better than online. That was pretty obvious from the beginning. So that's my solution to education, is just have the schools open, just have kids educated in person. The funding, I think schools are adequately funded in our state, so I'm not particularly eager to increase the funding. Maybe we increase it a little bit, but I'm also not real eager to reward the teachers union with more money for schools when they were the loudest voice demanding that the schools be closed and refusing to do their jobs and teach our children.
Okay, and the last issue before I move on to my next sections of questions, healthcare.
Healthcare, I favor universal health care. I don't really have a particular proposal to get universal health care in Minnesota, but that's something that the jury couldn't consider. Other people certainly will implement that. I would favor I had an experience going to the emergency room a few months ago, and I wrote about this on my blog. Uh, I was having some anyway a medical issue that I thought I should go to an urgent care clinic. I went to an urgent care clinic. I asked them whether I was worried about what the cost would be about getting a surprise bill for thousands and thousands of dollars, and that them telling me my insurance didn't cover it and I was responsible for it all. So I asked them whether they accepted my insurance. They didn't know. I asked them about the procedures they were doing, which was all standard stuff, a chest x-ray and some standard blood work. It was all pretty standard stuff. I asked them what the cost of that would be if my insurance did not cover it. They did not know that. But they did demand that I sign a contract that I thought, and reading the fine print, it seems like it didn't say this, but they demanded I sign a contract before they would treat me. The contract, I was worried the contract said that I'm agreeing to pay whatever they decide to charge me. They're not going to tell me what they're going to charge me, but whatever, and they're not going to tell me whether my insurance covers it, but whatever they decide after the fact to charge me, I have to pay it. I eventually signed it because it appeared it did not actually say that, but if it didn't say that, I don't know why they needed me to sign a contract. Um, uh, so anyway, I would have a new law. I would pass a law that healthcare providers have to tell patients whether they accept their insurance, and they have to tell patients what the procedures cost is before that has to be available on their website or in their office. And and that they have to charge everybody the same. All insurers, self-payers, everybody gets charged the same price.
Got it. And to those who are watching, be sure to put your questions in the comment section. I still haven't gotten any, and I see people watching. So, encourage you again to put your questions in the comment section so I can ask you, and then we can keep this moving in the right direction. So, my next questions are about, and I have never asked a candidate on that I've had this. Talk about in general, and I don't know if you want to do each one of the people who you're running against, but what in general do they all believe that you don't believe?
Okay, I'll just talk about the Republican and the Democrat. Um, the Republican Scott Jensen, um, I think they're both unacceptable candidates. Actually, the Republican Scott Jensen, he's threatened to jail our Secretary of State for running honest elections. Basically, we've got a Democratic Secretary of State. He runs elections. He promotes voting. He counted the votes accurately. Scott Jensen, the Republican, has twice said he wants to throw him in jail for running honest elections. He doesn't phrase it for running honest elections, but that's the crime. So I think that makes him basically an aspiring third world dictator. I think it disqualifies him from holding public office to want to jail honest public officials for trumped up no crime. So I disagree with him on that. He also is anti-abortion without exceptions for rape or incest or any exceptions for including also without exceptions for the health of the mother. So I disagree with him on that. I'm pro-choice on abortion. He opposes all types of gun control regulations. I'm in favor of reasonable gun control, for instance, banning assault weapons and universal background checks and banning ammunition for assault weapons and semi-automatics and automatics. He opposes all of that. So I differ with him on that. Like all Republicans, he's not very good on the environment. I disagree with him on that. Tim Walz, the Democrat, I disagree with him principally on the lockdowns. The lockdowns were absolutely catastrophic public policy response. I think the most destructive public policy since slavery. Uh, um, it threw, for one thing, it was the biggest infringement on freedom since slavery. In Minnesota, every citizen was sentenced to 7 weeks of home confinement, which is the sentence you would get for a third drunk driving offense or for assaulting your ex. And Tim Walz just, without even a statute from the legislature, he just ordered that we all had to stay in our, sentenced us all to home confinement for 7 weeks without a trial, without a law from the legislature. So I disagree with him on that, to say the least. Uh, Closing the schools, as I mentioned, incredibly destructive, destroyed education for our children for 2 years, destroyed the lives of many children, through many of them into mental illness and depression and anxiety and stuff. And children were at no risk of death from COVID. They're at lower risk of death from COVID than they are from the flu. So this was a decision to deliberately harm children in the hope that it would benefit the elderly. That's immoral on its face, even if it had worked, and it didn't work. It didn't have any effect on COVID deaths. He decided by the lockdowns to throw 1 in 5 Minnesotans into clinical depression. I think the point of life is to be happy. I think the point of government should be to promote happiness. He decided deliberately to destroy happiness, to fight a disease that was 1.7 times deadlier than the flu. So all of this makes him, by any objective measure, he's the worst governor in Minnesota history. By the increase in unhappiness and depression, through 1 in 5, deliberately decided to throw 1 in 5 Minnesotans into clinical depression. Deliberately decided to increase deaths of despair, suicides, drug overdose deaths, alcohol deaths, and to throw people into drug abuse and alcohol abuse.
That's the
Deliberately
incumbent,
decided to
correct?
destroy education. Sorry, what?
That's the incumbent, correct?
That's the incumbent.
Okay.
So I think by any objective measure, also the economy, as I mentioned previously, he decided to create shortages, which results in the inflation we've got now. He decided, of course, to close businesses, to close restaurants and small businesses, and in effect take businesses from their owners without compensation. He decided to throw 16% of the workforce out of their jobs. So by any objective measure, such as all the ones I've listed, he's the worst governor in Minnesota history. You couldn't possibly do a worse job. If you'd set out to do a worse job, you couldn't do a worse job than that. So I disagree with him on all of that. He's also kind of wishy-washy. He claims to be pro-choice on abortion, claims to support gun control laws, but he's never introduced anything or gotten anything done in those regards. And on the environment, he supported a Line 3, an oil pipeline taking tar sands from dirty oil tar sands from Saskatchewan to Wisconsin. So that contributed to global warming. He also pledged to consult with the Indian tribes whose land the pipeline went across, and they believe he never did consult with them, that he did not keep his word on that. So that he's terrible on, and now we've got an issue of whether we're going to. There's a proposal to build copper nickel mining near Lake Superior and near the Boundary Waters. So that leaches mercury and other toxic metals, as well as sulfuric acid. Those, of course, there's a plan to have ponds and so on, but ponds always fail. So it's really a certainty that the toxic metals and the sulfuric acid will leach into Lake Superior and the Boundary Waters, our wilderness area in northern Minnesota. He's unwilling to take a position on whether to poison Lake Superior and the Boundary Waters with toxic metals. I think it's a terrible idea. I strongly oppose that. But it's in keeping with his general pattern of trying to have it both ways and not take a position on that.
Got it.
So okay. I disagree with him on that.
Okay, so now I'm going to reverse the question. And again, you can talk about any of the candidates that you want to. So what issues do the other candidates raise that you actually agree with?
With Scott Jensen, the Republican, I agree with his opposition to the lockdowns, and I commend his courage. He's a doctor, he's a primary care doctor, and he's opposed the lockdowns from the beginning, which I think is the medically appropriate decision, as well as the politically appropriate decision. And he's been investigated numerous times trying to strip his license as a doctor because he opposes the lockdowns. So I commend his courage on that. I commend his political stance on that. And just generally freedom, a libertarian view, more libertarian views that he's got. I agree with him on that. Tim Walz, I agree with him in the sense that he's better than the Republican on the environment, I guess. So I agree with him on that. He wanted to do the clean car standards to help reduce global warming and have cleaner cars sold in Minnesota. I agree with him on that. He's got some some proposals to increase the amount of public lands in nature in Minnesota. I agree with him on that. He's publicly said that he opposes the wolf hunt in Minnesota. I agree with him on that. That's probably about it, I think, that I agree with him on. I agree with him on his stance on being pro-abortion and pro-gun control, but as I say, I think he's been a disappointment in not really doing much about those.
Got it. Have you received any endorsements yet, besides from the general public?
No, not really. Well, I received an endorsement from Dean Barkley, a former U.S. senator with the Independence Party in Minnesota. So I've received his endorsement. That's probably about it, I think.
Okay. And then my next to left, I think I have like 2 more questions left here. And I definitely appreciate your time. And audience, remember, if you were out there and you're a third party candidate and you're wanting to run for office, even though election day is November the 8th, please email me at tracymediallc@gmail.com. If you plan on running in 2024, it's never too early to start planning to run for office. I would love to talk to you. Just send me an email and I'll connect to you. I wanted to ask about an issue that's really kind of sprouted its head, and I kind of alluded to it in the beginning when I asked you about who donates, who you would take donations from. But in terms of how money seems to influence, I call them the Republicans because to me they're exactly the same in this regard. But talk about what you would do as governor with the idea you're talking about in terms of the legislation by jury. What is it that you would advocate for to make elections, accessible to anyone in Minnesota, and they wouldn't have to worry about running for, raising millions or perhaps thousands of dollars or self-funding campaigns to run for office?
The principal thing is jury democracy itself. So that eliminates money entirely for the jurors, for effectively one house of the legislature. And to get office, to be on the jury, you're just selected at random. So you don't need to spend any money at all to run for that. I would support public funding of elections. Again, it's ideas we could propose to the jury and I think would likely pass. People don't want to spend tax dollars really on campaigns, but the alternative is to allow the contributors to fund the campaign, as you say. So I would favor some sort of a matching system that if you get for every individual donation of any size, or $5 or $10 or more, you get, say, $50 from the state. So you're rewarded for the number of donors you get rather than the amount of dollars you get from people.
Right. Okay. And here's another question I've never asked a candidate before, but November 8th comes and you win the governorship.
Let's hope not. Sorry, go ahead.
Now you just threw my question because I'm like, no, you're not running to win. Are you running to raise an issue?
No, I'm joking. I'm running to win. I'm running to implement my ideas. But undoubtedly I will be happier my personal life, I'll be happier not being governor than I would be being governor.
Understand. So I'll ask the question this way. Let's just say you do win. You
Yep.
win the governorship. Finish this sentence. On day one, the first thing I will do is blank.
First thing I will do is ask the legislature to appropriate the money for jury democracy, and implement that system by law. Yeah, so that's the first thing I would do.
Got it. So here comes the second question. And it's not the reverse question because this is going to continue on the previous question. In your acceptance speech, and I'll give you 2 minutes, give a 2-minute acceptance speech.
Oh, I don't know. You're putting me on the spot. I haven't prepared an acceptance speech. I probably won't prepare an acceptance speech.
Oh, wow. I thought for sure you would have had one prepared.
No, a victory speech. No, I just say that I'm grateful to the people of Minnesota for putting me in office, and that this is going to be fun, and we're going to make history with jury democracy, and it's going to spread from Minnesota, I think, around the world, and Minnesota will be known forever as the birthplace of jury democracy.
Okay, so now I can get to my opposite question. So let's just say November 8th, things don't work out the way you want. Now, you said you'd be much happier if you didn't win. So, what would you say in your you didn't win? I don't know what it's called.
Concession speech.
Thank you very much. Concession speech. What would you in general say?
Oh, I'd just say congratulations to whoever won. I mean, as I said, I've got a pretty. I seriously think that both Jensen and Walz, the two major party candidates, that they really are unacceptable. So It's not going to be a very. It's not going to be a very encouraging concession speech, but. So we'll try another way to get jury democracy implemented and get the word out about it, I think.
Okay, and lastly, this is the last question. Tell everyone how they can connect to your campaign in these last few weeks before the election.
Our website is McTavish4MN, the number 4MN.org. So sign up on there for our email list. Sign up to take lawn signs or to distribute literature would be great. And donate to the campaign. All that would be great.
Thank you so much, Hugh, for
thank you, Tracy.
Doing this interview. I appreciate it. Again, I apologize to the audience for my StreamYard. I don't know what happened. I had the link and it said, "Oh, you deleted it." I'm like, I can't remember it, but I must have. But I definitely want to invite you back. If you want to come back, that I do that for all my guests. Oh, we got a question here at the last second here, and I want to make sure I get this in. If you happen not to win, would you run again? Hugh, are you there? I think Hugh is frozen. So we're going to just let that kind of hang out there because Hugh is frozen. But I want to thank you for coming on to our program this evening. Please, everyone, like this video, share this video, subscribe to the page, and I will see you next week. Have a fantastic evening. Bye-bye, everyone.